All right, so part two of portfolio reviews. We're gonna do another five more artists that send their portfolios to me. This might go a little bit quicker because again, this is sort of gonna be a series that if I feel like one of the suggestions is sort of like repeated with a previous reviewer or a review artist or portfolio, I'm sort of gonna skip a little bit of that. And so I think most of the suggestions here are gonna apply to most people as well. And so um, I want to make sure that I cover the most ground with that. And so let's get started here with and I'm not gonna this was one of the portfolio that I wasn't going to review. When I look here, sometimes I'm looking for that you have enough content for me to check it out, right? Not just like one piece or just two pieces. But I saw this one first, and I was like, okay, there's some iterations that's pretty cool, or some design here, which is pretty cool. And then I got into this one, and I started scrolling down, and I thought, um, it started getting a little bit more interesting, right? And then I got to this part, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Now this person is looking specifically to do world building for sci-fi, um, hard surface architecture stuff, which is really good, which is pretty clear with some of its work. Um, but this is very similar to the one of the previous artists from the part one of the series, where we have to think about how we're building this stuff. And I actually really like, specifically this one here, and this one has some potential, but um, the same suggestions is gonna be it's gonna be for that, right? So I have one of his pieces here, and this is from the Halo 4 concept here, and so we want to see that level, and we don't have to copy the style or anything, but we want to take the foundations of the design into our own, right? And I can see like the leveling of the different parts of what composes this particular design are there, right? It's not just like one piece of um, metal, flat, and then there's just like another one, a different angle, and then you get a square or a cube or something, right? So there's like this complexity of building this piece into the design. And so this is like, I think this is great as a general shape, right? But then we need to go in and break up all these areas when we can, in order to add that complexity that is gonna have in real life. So that'll be my main thing for him. And I also was looking at this image, and I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about something. And when you have an image that, for example, like this one, and I look at it, and like, for example, I look at the character here in the foreground, and the helmet, and the body armor and all that, like this, just this part here, like I think it's just like beautiful, like I think it's great. But then I look at the rest of the image, and I'm like, well, why don't we have the same complexity in the rest of the image, right? And I could assume a bunch of things, right? But when we're working on images, we want to make sure that we have a unified sort of level of rendering, design, the way we're thinking about it, that it shows throughout the whole image as a whole, not just like one section of it. And so we want to make sure that everything is on par, because all this part here I think is great, right? Um, but I want to make sure, and this happens with, especially if you do like photo batching or just painting brush strokes, like sometimes we just work in an area, we don't work as well into another area. And so we want to make sure that we get that unified throughout. But getting this complexity, and if I was at his level, right, at this stage, I would be like, okay, I get this, I have the major shape, I have the layout of it. um, how can I incorporate the foundations of this into this? And I would just go in and start sketching um, things into here, just to kind of imitate what this person did here into my own design, and how can I extrapolate and extract some of those foundations. And then I'll go back and sort of like redesign it and doing all that, because we want to push that up to a higher level um, when we're doing this sort of stuff. But I think that this is the right mindset, right, to have. So I would just do more of that. because right now you just don't have a lot of content, but that comes with time. So that would be the first one. Now for we have Samuel Arroyo here, um, and mostly he's trying to get better at drawing more complex scenes in perspective, tackle backgrounds. He's just started freelancing. He's trying companies like Nickelodeon, which I sort of see that a little bit here, but mostly in the animation industry, which is good. Um, Now I see you have a lot of layers, which is great. I think it's great. And so what I would think of is how can I make what I already have? Let's say this is my work here. I will look at it and I'm like, how can I make it, you know, or how can I put in a higher level of of an image, right? Because the layout is fine, the design of the buildings is fine. I don't see any major issues with the composition or the lighting could be a little tricky, but it's a layout, so a layout doesn't necessarily need to have um, the lighting per se. And so one of the things that I'm thinking is that the way that I'm gonna use the thickness of lines, I'm gonna use it to my advantage, right? So right now you have all these thick shapes and lines of of the line drawing of black, right? But they're almost like all over the place, right? Not all over the place, maybe that they're scattered, but they're just like in every facet of face of the environment, right? On my foreground, middle ground, background. Not so much the background, but all the way up here, right? And a lot of times that flattens the image, right? And so I want to use the thickness of my lines to my advantage. I'll show you an example here. Right, so this is a great readable layout. Everything's sort of like uniform, but it's very strategic how they almost left the background like or the foreground very very clear and bare. And in the back here, the mountains don't have a lot, um, and so this is another one. But I like this one a lot because it distributed the values of the environment in a way that it portrays the mood and separates the different planes of the environment, which is really great. It's really nice. And for example, when I look at at yours over here, like all this up area here in the sky is very contrasty because of all the texture and the clouds and everything that's happening back here. And so I think it's taking away from the bottom down here. And so I probably will have tackled. And again, I don't know anything about the story or the what's happening in the layout, so I don't know. But even if the action was happening in the background, like maybe this volcano is like erupting, I will probably will have cleaned up the sky a lot more and my lines um, in the foreground, middle ground area here, and so that way the layout itself is a lot more clear and sharp and crisp. And I want to think like if I'm looking at layout, I want it to look like this or like this, right? This is like the goal for it. And that shows your craftsmanship with hand drawing, with your drawing, and all that. I will also recommend for you to get into 3D. I don't know if you are, but I would definitely recommend that because that way you can play a lot more with the layouts and all that. Now, another thing that I wanted to touch on is when you do things like architecture, I see that a lot. Bookshelves, doors, windows, stuff like that. When you have things like this, where things just meet into each other, right, like this, and you have this area, just like one piece here, that doesn't really show the design. And again, if you're just a layout artist, maybe that's not part of your job, but as an environment artist, you have to think about these things. I would really just look again at your references because I know you have them here, and I would look at those areas. It's kind of hard to see on this because they're so small, and see how they built in real life those bookshelves and stuff. And that way, I can the same way that I was talking about this, extract that foundation and then apply it to my own. Because this right here doesn't really seem I cannot relate to it because it doesn't work that way in real life, right? And so maybe you have some sort of mechanism that holds the shelf in place, or this is like indented or put into the big here. There's maybe some design here of layering. We separate the top from the body of the sides. And so that way we bring a little bit more of buildability into our concepts and design. So that's Samuel Arroyo. Now we're going to go into Santiago Villegas. Now Santiago wants to get more client, I guess. Sorry, he wants to work for games like board games and Wizards of the Coast type of artwork. He's taking some classes. Currently doing illustration full time and for making selling merchandise on artist alleys online and wholesale, such as children books. Okay, great. So, you know, if you want to get into the board games, um, which is the codes, TCG type of illustrations, you have to really think about the product itself. So illustrations for example, Magic the Gathering, you need to be able to notice them and understand them from far away like this because the artwork itself is just small on a card, right? Um, and so every time we're composing that image or that illustration, it needs to read at that level. But my main thing that I wanted to touch with you is that I took a look at some of your work. I just took one and put it into Photoshop, changed to black and white. And one of the ways that we can approach that sense of readability into our artwork at a small form in a card is by getting the right values throughout the image, right? And so when I look at this image and I turn it black and white, I can see that you have a huge range of values from light to dark almost everywhere in the image, right? So I see some here, there's a big contrast here, big contrast here, here, like all of this over here. And this is almost like getting lost a little bit, this area here. But there's still, you have all this contrast of that range of value. And so when we have an illustration, we have a focal point, whether we have one or just secondary focal points, but we want to have the most contrast in that focal point. And we bring one of the ways that we bring contrast to the image is by having contrast in value. You could have in color, shapes, scale, etc. But one of the ways is value, and we want to have the most contrast in the focal point, which is, I'm guessing, is like this character here, right? The rest of the stuff could be sort of secondary, but when I turn the image black and white, if I see that I have the same contrast all around, it's kind of hard to dictate where my eye is gonna go and where my focal point is, right? And so this is a very crucial thing, especially for artwork that is gonna go on a card. And I think just in illustration in general, because you want to be in charge of how the eye of the viewer moves around the image and where you want the focus on. And so if I look at some of your other images, that's we sort of had the same problem, right? And so we want to make sure that you identify what the focal point is, and then um, you play with that contrast and those values to attract to the eye to the area. Cool. And so next is going to be Guillem Villegas. Now, Guillem has a few artwork here, right? I took a look at a couple in here. For the most part, uh, the artist wants to work as a concept artist in the film and video game industry, mostly environments and props. And so when I look at the portfolio and for example, you tell me you want to work in environments and props, one of the first things that I'm going to ask is then why do you have some creature design and sculpting and all that, right? And so to me, if I want to work as an environment, I'm not going to do anything for my portfolio, whether it's super fun or not. I'm just not going to spend the time to do anything outside of that. till I reach that goal. Once you're established and you're working and you're doing your thing, then like I will feel like, yeah, feel free to branch out and do other things. But the time that you spend on these could have been spent into either working to get a better product on the regular environment ones, or just create more stuff, right? Um, and so I want to make sure that you're pretty clear with what you want on your portfolio. But I was thinking of some of these, and all the like some of these are pretty cool. They're pretty clear. I like the sort of the way you approach the concept part of it, like with all this views and layouts and concepts. And so I think that's the right idea. Like I think you're tackling it in the right way. So I think right now it's just a matter of how can you elevate your designs and your pieces of work, right? Now, this particular project, Reborn, I'm not sure if it's like a personal project or somebody for a client, but on one of them, I saw like you also have like a logo. I wouldn't even spend the time to figure out a logo for my environments. Like, there's just no way. Um, if you're thinking about, oh, maybe that gives a better presentation, not necessarily. Like, presentation was one of the topics that I wanted to talk with you because, like, for example, this right here, this could have been probably read a bit better if the background was just a simple gray color and then you had the concepts on top. But when you have all this texture and then this gradient here, like it takes away from understanding and not understanding, but just appreciating the concept itself. And that tells me that you are when I look at an image like this, where you have this here, this up here, this, and this, and then the background, all that, it's almost like you're trying other things to try to enhance the actual design that you did, instead of just showcasing the design the way it is. And so, I will be careful with having this sort of presentation, like, and let me see if I can show you just a simple one. I mean, even if you have like you can see here, right? Like this is just a simple gradient, right? But it enhances the actual the actual concept design. Um, I'll show you here. I'm gonna do it, and you could maybe if you're thinking like, oh, but maybe I don't know what sort of presentation to do or what to do for a presentation. Like you can just literally go to, and we can do this right now here, so you can see it's not that difficult. We can just go into like Pinterest or something like that and do a little bit of search, and I will find something that is successful, like in the industry or like our station or something like that, right? But I could take a look at, for example, even something like this. Let's see here. Like this is just a very simple presentation of the concept itself, right? It's very simple. We can take a look at some of his stuff, but it's just very simple, right? We don't want the presentation to take over the actual concept, right? And so I'll be careful. I'll be careful with that. Now, that's just presentation issues, which is one topic. Again, focus on what you really want to work on. Anything else is just really extra stuff that maybe you don't really need to spend time with it. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that I saw like you had a little GIF showing sort of the process. I don't think that's super necessary to have the process of how you went from the 3D render to the final painting on your portfolio. Um, like I think most people can tell that you use 3D and then you get to the final product. But through that process, I noticed that there wasn't as much quote unquote change or fixes from the 3D render to the final. And so, um, one of the things that I would recommend for everybody that works from 3D to 2D painting is to So there's just usually most of the time places and areas where you just need to paint over and fix things and redo things in the post production sort of painting process. And I don't want you to depend 100% from what you get on the render. Sometimes you have to make some changes. Like for example, like I would have, this mountain here has all this noise of texture, right, and back here, but this is not such an important um, area, and so I'll probably just grab this shadow color and just keep most of the silhouette from here. And the other thing is like, the shape of this is not as interesting, and so I'll probably play with the shape a little bit to make it more interesting. And so every time I work on a render, I'm always looking for those areas that I need to paint over or fix in order for me to enhance the real focus of the uh, of the concept itself, right? Um, like right now, this character I think has way too much contrast. Like there's almost like a light hitting that character there when all this foreground is in shadow, and so I'll probably silhouette that character a little bit more, just to kind of hide him in the foreground and enhance what's over here. All right. So lastly, we have Rabir. Now, Rabir has some artwork more illustrative, and the reason I'm doing a portfolio on this one, let's see here. He mentioned he wants to emotionally impact. He wants to tell emotionally impactful stories through beautiful paintings, dynamic color, and lighting. Um, and up to that point, it's like, yeah, you can do that right now. Like, there's really nothing stopping you from doing just that part. But then he said, I want to work as a concept artist, and then do visual development, and then art direct. And so I think concept artist and visual development is sort of the same thing. Um, and then you can, move on to art direction. But if you want to be a concept artist, then that's sort of what we need to have in our portfolio, right? Maybe this sort of artwork could be good for your own personal, um, just your personal journey of just experimenting with art and doing art. But as a concept artist, you need to show that you can design, um, whether it's characters, environments, props, whatever the case may be, that you can design that and then showcase that in a good way. And so I did wanted to talk a little bit about some of your or some of your black and whites. I picked this one, but we can apply it to some of this. But when you're working in black and white, you want to be the great thing about black and white is you don't have to worry about color, but your values need to be on point. And so I wanted to show you some different styles, quote unquote, but that are still successful in being a black and white sort of a sketch layout. And these are from other artists that I found. But you can see, when I'm trying something like if I'm doing like a black and white sketch or a 3D model or some sort of design of something, I always like to look at what has been successful in the past about that particular thing, and I try to emulate it and imitate it just so I can learn the things that work and the things that don't work, right? And so if I was in your position, I would look at my artwork, which is different, yeah, up here, and then I would look um, at the ones that I think are more successful doing the thing that I want to do, right? And these are so almost like three different sort of like styles, quote unquote, but we can see that the graphic reads of the composition is pretty clear, right? The shapes, the the ratio of where they're putting the values, right? It's working, right? Like for example, in here there's mostly in shadow, and we have all these little pieces of light being hit by the actual light source. In here, the characters, it's if we take the compositional rules of thirds, that character is like right at that line here on the left, and the background is almost fogged out just so it doesn't attract that much attention, right? We have a lighter background behind the character to make him pop. We have a very clear read of what this is saying, even though it doesn't really have a lot of detail. We can still know what's going on and what's closer to the camera, what's behind it, and those planes of distance, right? We can see a very clear understanding of what the lighting is in all three of these. And so those are the things that I would come here and then, okay, what am I not doing that these artists are doing, and how I can incorporate that into my own piece, right? And I wouldn't be ashamed of almost saying like imitating, copying what others are doing, because that's how you're gonna learn stuff, right? And that's how you're gonna understand what successful artists are doing in order to be successful, and then you can apply that to your own work. And so I wouldn't feel bad to grab this and just imitating some of the stuff that's happening here, mostly this one because it's a pretty similar content, and that way I can understand what they did, and then I can apply that from that point on. And so a lot of times it's really just looking at other people's work and really imitating what they're doing, because they're already at that spot where I want to be. And so that would be my recommendation to you. Um, Again, these are some of the artists that send their portfolio to me. I'm gonna do probably have a couple more in the series, and hopefully these are of of any help to you guys. And again, I'm gonna try to do around five of them, depending on, but I won't be able to get to all of them because I think just in general sense, most of these suggestions are applicable to most artists. And so again, I hope that these were helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.